Reality's weird, man. Reality's really weird. Silence has been saying so much to me, and I don't know, it's been strange. Like, this transformation from a life lived more engaged by the ego self. What I mean is sort of a life lived through the lens of concepts and through the lens of story and judgment and rationale and reason and desire and fear. And as that dies, it doesn't die, it feels like a death. But I've been living in a lot more silence, and to be honest, I that's comfortable, you know, and I'm very grateful to have a partner who I feel extremely comfortable being and resting in silence with, and who I know won't judge me. But still, you know, even then, a thought here or there sort of pulls me back into mind identification, if you will, or into some kind of fear, or into an insecurity that suggests that, I don't know, I'm not good enough, or not it's not even as explicit as that, but it's just something's wrong about you or about the situation because you don't have enough to say right now. Why aren't you like others who have a funny or an interesting response to what's being said? But really, I'm trying to normalize, you know, what feels like a much more expansive reception, and just listening of, you know, like let's say someone speaks to me and I think what they're saying is really interesting or really insightful, and now what feels natural to me is to just let that echo, to just feel what was said, and not to construct that into something sort of and put it back. You know, of course sometimes that kind of reflection or that kind of echo is what would be natural, but yeah, so I guess here what I'm just trying to reflect is that I've really noticed a shift, and it's a part of sort of a greater trend or transformation that I've noticed in my life of letting go, which has been a big part of me coming here, which is, you know, if you want stillness, or rather, I wanted stillness, and just came by. Hello, Selkie. Hello, Selkie. Say hello. Say hello. Come here. Say hello. Say hello. How are you doing? How are you doing? Oh. Whoa. That's amazing. This is SoCoC, everyone. Yeah. So I've let go of a lot of things, a lot of stickiness in my life. And a lot of stickiness in my life. And the mind, amongst other things, I'm sure, is definitely a trickster. It has a way of disguising itself as different things, you know, these ideas of having a spiritual ego after sort of having a kind of realization or a deepening of realization or awakening, whatever you want to call it. And once, like when you have an experiential shift, the experience is there in the moment, and often it can last for a little while, but your mind will co-opt that experience, and to some extent it's to hold on to it, right? It's to keep experiencing that, to, you know, to secure that level of realization or freedom that was attained. But that's not that's not how it works, because you gotta keep cycling in order to reach a new level. But because the story keeps keeps desiring sort of this higher perspective, it wants to be a step ahead. It wants to, you know, ultimately find some kind of security in the story, and thus it'll co-opt these ideas. And what I've found myself wondering recently is, like, where am I? Where am I? And you know, I know I'm always here, and I'm always now, and I can come back to that pretty consistently. But you can feel that, you know, like when you're in a kind of moment, you know, in a kind of contraction, and the resistance in you is like, I don't want this, right? Your mind will throw all the tools it has, all the, you know, to be fair, they're more than platitudes, but like, throw all the pearls of wisdom at the situation, and or sort of subtle perspective things, you know, essentially like these co-opted, you know, these condensed, like little packaged versions of realization. Be like, oh yeah, it's just this, it's like this, you know, snap out of it, get whatever, and you kind of get into this tailspin, or at least I do, this tailspin of it's ultimately resistance. Ultimately, you're just pushing and pulling on on your experience. Yeah, and I guess where I'm confused is I'm not really I'm not I am confused, but I'm also not really confused. The part of me that's there is not confused. There's a part of me that doesn't need answers, and it's there, and it's the part of me that allows me to trust as deeply as I have. And then there's the part of me the part of this that is telling a story and making statements and making judgments and drawing conclusions and ultimately telling a story. And yeah, I suppose there is that subtle, like the confusing part to that part. The confusing part to that conceptual part is how and where I exist as sort of my larger space of being, because the identification with that is much weaker. I don't really identify with it, but I know there are deeper layers of realization because it still thinks, which is still me somehow identifying with it. Like, if I'm not identified with it, who am I? What is this thinking? And of course, like, when I'm in relationship with anyone, but primarily my wife now, it's like, that's me, but it's not me, and I'm identified with it, but I'm also not identified with it. And of course, it's just the conceptual part that somehow craves a black or white answer. It's like this or it's not like this. And yeah, really that part that doesn't require an answer is trying to feel into, or rather, the part that doesn't require an answer does feel into it, but the part that wants an answer, sort of the story that's speaking to you right now, is trying to feel into the comfort it can find in holding paradox. Yeah. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that I'm grateful on a daily basis. And it's been a wild journey. My last video was over a year ago. and I'm just so grateful. Cause that shit was, this shit is not this shit is not easy. Like, I had to, when I say I had to, so much of it didn't feel like I was doing anything. It felt, it's really fundamentally a process of surrender. And surrendering is not a doing. It's like, sometimes you hear it's like, oh, it takes courage, or oh, you're so courageous for making this choice. Courage feels like too much of a doing. Courage feels more like what I would have done fully identified with the story as sort of the mighty hero who's doing the thing, against all odds, against all of the fears, or whatever. But here, it's much quieter than that. It's much more subtle than that. It takes a humility to get out of your own way and to surrender. But again, surrender is the natural state of this, and the surrender and the natural state is in alignment with the sense of yes, the sense of rightness, the way in which your body, your being, not just your mind, but if you feel into a choice on some level, even if not immediately, on some level, you know where to go, and that can feel like excitement. That can be dressed up in a lot of fear, if there's a lot of attachment sort of in the way of it. I think in general I came to this place without particularly strong attachment. I don't know. I can't make a qualifier like that, but anyways, I stumbled across these ideas, and part of me knew to trust it, and I did, and now I find myself in paradise with the wife of my dreams and a little baby, and I'm a dad, and that's mind-blowing. All of it is mind-blowing. There's so much that could be said, but at the same time I feel like nothing. There's nothing to say. Because all the saying, all the saying is can just be a distraction, and of course, to the mind, an explanation or a story can be motivating or helpful as a pointer. But what I've found in my own life is that the seeking, and of course the seeking is what got me here. But really, the seeking, even if it's well-intentioned, the mind is trying hard to get to the place it wants to get. But really, it's a kind of avoidance strategy. It's a kind of strategy to keep circling in a place to avoid being, because like in that place of surrender, in that place of being, you need to confront the confusion and all the gnarly, scary bits. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, cool. feels good to be back. Please comment below if you have any thoughts or questions, anything that you would like to ramble about or vibe on, or yeah, any of that. See ya, bye.